The ANC's Parliamentary caucus has attributed to the reversal, of the VAT hike to the unity of the parties that supported the fiscal framework. It praised those who put their differences aside for the benefit of citizens, especially the poor. ANC Chief Whip Mdumiseni Ntuli joins us now for more. A very good evening to you, Mdumiseni. Thanks very much for your time. At that briefing that we both attended earlier today, the ANC Secretary General, Fikile Mbalula, admitted that the matter could have been handled a lot differently. I suppose that's with the benefit of hindsight.
Well, good evening, Vuyo, and good evening to the viewers at home and everywhere else. Yeah, the SG is quite correct. You see, it's the first time that we have a government of national unity, and that was the first budget after these elections. What he meant by that is that, unlike in the past, starting with the ANC itself, there's a great deal of work that we need to do in terms of changing our approach on how we interface with matters relating to the budget as a party, first and foremost. And secondly, in terms of how we then involve in that process the other parties who are working with us in the GNU, but also in Parliament in general. And the reason why the SG is making that point, the law prescribes that the Minister of Finance, and is in the Constitution, is the only minister, by the way, whose responsibilities are defined by the Constitution. Others are delegated by the President. It explains how he has to go about putting together a budget and presenting it to Parliament. And the ANC has, over the years, sort of allowed that process to really exclusively in the domain of the minister, who I would imagine will consult with the President on this and that, and the movement will only interface much more substantially with what is contained in the budget in terms of rands and cents when it's presented in Parliament. The overall thrust and the policy framework will be understood by the ANC. What we want to achieve, we want an expenditure, we want an investment in infrastructure, we want to create jobs. So that overall thrust will be understood by the movement. But the details about how to go about achieving that objectives have always been left to deployees to deal with.
But then when there were warning signs or red flags, even, especially given the fact that everyone was on uncharted territory, was it necessary, I suppose again with the benefit of hindsight, to then go to the wall in spite of the possible consequences that you have now actually faced in reality?
Well, I don't think that we went into the war. We had to follow a process that is prescribed in law and in terms of our legislation, which unfortunately is not understood by many people, some of whom have been in Parliament for many years. And that you can see on the conduct of the Democratic Alliance. On two fronts, they demonstrate, I would not say they were dishonest or they were lying, because that may sound like an insult. But their own understanding of how processes unfold in Parliament was really out of touch with the actual situation of what happens in Parliament. The minister presents a budget for you. The law requires that that budget must be taken to a portfolio committee, which was done. The portfolio committee must conduct public consultation, which was done, including allowing, where possible, where necessary, the parties who are represented in the portfolio committee to make their own submissions. And if they take a decision as a committee based on those submissions, that as they did, we adopt the fiscal framework, but we're making a recommendation that this question of the VAT is very contentious. We need more time to deal with it, and we're of the view that there are other available alternative revenue sources that can be utilized to offset the VAT. That's permitted by law. What people who are not familiar with Parliament have failed to appreciate is that after the budget was presented and through this process of the committee and back to Parliament, the minister is still required to present what is called the rates bill. The rates bill is the one that, once adopted by Parliament, you can no longer make the changes that we were saying have to be made within 30 days, because those changes can't be made unless Parliament itself again comes back to make the changes. Now, if you don't understand how the parliament works, you will do what the DA was saying, because they were campaigning that it's impossible, campaigning on the basis of a lie, that it's impossible to change the VAT unless it is taken to court. But I was very surprised today when they are the first one to celebrate a lie, by the way, because if that was not going to be possible, it means the minister acted illegally in terms of him changing the VAT without taking the process to parliament. But they were the first to celebrate. And I'm saying the reason why they did that, because they don't understand how parliament works. Until the minister places before parliament what is called the rates bill, he has public pronouncement. He can amend it at any given point in time, as he has done it early hours of this morning about the VAT. So there's nothing illegal about that. And I'm sure many people were awakened by the fact that when they needed to pay attention to what the minister has done and its legal implication, they realized that actually what the ANC and the other parties have said right from the onset, that within 30 days we can still amend the VAT, was actually correct, as opposed to what was a campaign of the DA and some critics, including some analysts, by the way, who purported to be economic analysts and were saying that, no, what these ones are saying is not going to happen. Look at banks. They've already issued an information that VAT is going to be... We said to them, you don't understand how parliament works. In terms of the law, parliament will only be unable to make the changes such as those if we've processed the rates bill, which the minister is going to present to parliament, and he is yet to do so. So we knew from the point of view of the ANC and these other parties that we are on top of the game. This thing is very in line with the law. And the minister at the right point will have to make an intervention, persuaded by the submissions we made with the other parties and, of course, with the rest of other South Africans and stakeholders who made very, very informed submissions about what we do to offset the VAT.
But then, whether it's analysts, whether it's us journalists, whether it's the banks, remember this is uncharted territory for everyone. Hence, I want to ask you again whether you're not giving even the DA, who may well be your nemesis right now, the benefit of a doubt, given the fact that this is not something that is,
it's an uncharted terrain. You are quite correct about that. But it doesn't mean that when you are walking into an uncharted terrain, you have no responsibility to understand the rules within which you have to play the game. The rules have always been there. The terrain may be different in terms of how you handle the budget where there are disagreements. But the fact that there is a law regulating how the budget is going to be passed by Parliament, you can't be forgiven as a member of Parliament not to understand that. Because when you don't appreciate that process as a member of Parliament, we can forgive you as analysts and journalists and everybody else. But when a political party that has been in Parliament for the past 30 years consciously communicates falsehood to the nation, that which we've decided on as Parliament is illegal, it cannot be done, how do we forgive that? Because it's an uncharted terrain, but let's then exchange ideas about how best to walk through this uncharted terrain, but do so in the context of the existing legislation, which is the legislation of Parliament. So where I have a concern, and maybe it may not be exactly the same with you and any other South African, is when a member of Parliament, a political party for that matter, campaigns on the basis of a lie and deceit, and telling the South Africans, and some of them are listening and get convinced by that lie, that what the ANC and these other parties have said is actually impossible in law. But when this thing happens and the minister makes an announcement, they are the first one to call a press conference at 5 o'clock in the morning to celebrate a VAT. And I was saying to myself, how do you celebrate something that you said is illegal? You have gone to court instead of dealing with the matter within the confines of Parliament. But we have gone to court not just to challenge the VAT Act, to interdict its implementation. Why do you go to court? Because the minister is going to come back to Parliament, present a rates bill, stand up in Parliament and say, on the basis of this rate bill, we disagree with this, and as a consequence of which we're not going to support the adoption of the VAT. So I'm saying for you, in essence, you are quite right that it's an uncharted terrain. But we are part of leadership of this country in that Parliament. We have much more bigger responsibility than people who are not serving in Parliament, let alone those among us who have been there for the past 30 years.
Of course, all of this is happening within the realm of politics, and we can't divorce it from that. And we have a history. You know what has happened over the past 30 years and over the past 15 in particular, where people have had to go to the courts to deal with matters that the legislature and the executive could have easily dealt with. We do come from that past, which may have reinforced the idea that when you feel you're not being listened to, courts are the only way to resolve issues. Should we not accept that as well?
It's perfectly acceptable for you. But when you choose to go to court, explain your reasons factually. Don't communicate a lie and a public deceit in order to justify your action of going to court. Don't say I'm going to court because what Parliament is doing is engage in an illegal process. That's a lie. Say I'm going to court because I participated in the Portfolio Committee. We were defeated by a vote. I participated in Parliament when the fiscal framework was adopted. We were defeated by the vote. And therefore, because of that defeat, I'm now going to challenge this matter in court. By the way, if the DA had succeeded on the 2nd of April, if the vote was on their favor, what was going to be illegal about that? Nothing. What is illegal about what happened on the 2nd of April is that the DA lost the vote. And the mistake they committed, which is, in my view, is a monumental mistake they committed, is not to read the law. It's not to be conscious of the fact that the minister is yet to present the rate bill. When the minister makes a public statement, he makes a public statement. He says, no, I'm increasing the VAT by 0.5%, goes to processes. He has an obligation to bring that to Parliament, for Parliament to adopt it so that it becomes a legally binding position of the country. When that has not happened, why do you go to court? Unless if you are saying to us and South Africans, we don't believe that when the rates bill is presented in Parliament, we will win again in terms of the vote to get the VAT removed. And because we don't believe the processes in Parliament, even before they are tested, we are running to court. So you can go to court. We are a democratic country that recognizes the importance of our judiciary as a final arbiter on dispute. But when you take the route of going to court, don't communicate a lie to the people of South Africa. The second lie was communicated this morning, that the Minister of Finance has made a commitment. He has reached out to them and said to them, look, we want an out-of-court settlement. I think I'm going to be defeated in this process, whatever that argument has been said. We want an out-of-court settlement. Now, Vuyo, as journalists, you must demand from the DA. An out-of-court settlement is not a gentleman's conversation over tea or a whiskey. It has to be written down. Where is a written document from the minister in which he is now appealing to the DA that they settle out of court? Another second lie has been told this morning, and nobody pays attention to it. Why? Because it's said by the DA and because of the color of the people who are leading the Democratic Alliance. And nobody cares about a lie that is communicated to the people of South Africa. So that's why I'm saying there's nothing wrong. If you go to court because you are not here, we all have that option, and we'll exercise it whenever we have to do so. But we must not embed our approach on lies. We must say we're going to court because we're not happy with the manner in which Parliament has handled this process and we think something illegal has occurred. And not propagate falsehoods to justify our position in the public domain.
Of course, I mean, you are now going to, notwithstanding the court processes that the Democratic Alliance still feels need to be followed to the letter and other demands that it is going to make. You have the responsibility, actually, to then marshal your troops to ensure that going forward in Parliament, you do indeed, as one of the leading governing party, have to make sure that things go according to the rule of law. The country, no faults can be found in processes that you are going to engage in. Have you done the preparatory work that is necessary to make sure that you never again come back to the situation we are still coming out of, but it's not over yet?
Look, from the ANC's point of view, like I said, we need to change the way in which we relate with budget processes. And the leadership of the ANC is discussing that matter. At an appropriate time, they will communicate how best do they think the movement must interface with processes leading to the presentation of the budget. But secondly, that system also, that mechanism which must be put in place, must also include the government of national unity. And we will have to test that new approach as we prepare for the budget review in October. Because what happens in October largely influences what will happen in the following year. So we need to set up a new mechanism through which parties in the GNU and parties in Parliament in general will be accommodated into a process where they make their inputs. Their contributions are considered by the National Treasury and Ministry, responded upon, so that by such time when the minister presents a budget, that budget presentation has taken on board various ideas and views contained in the House, in Parliament, but also input from different political parties. And that is not to say, therefore, the minister would present a budget to a GNU meeting before it goes to Parliament, because that would be illegal. But the minister will have to have more time to ensure that he receives the inputs which should be coming from the GNU parties and the ANC itself as an organization, so that in the formulation of the budget, some or all of those inputs are taken on board, such that when the budget is presented, we avoid a situation like this. Because, I mean, from the ANC's point of view, we also, when this budget was presented for you, we said we support the budget, but we're willing to listen to the concerns that many people are expressing, including within our own ranks, about the 0.5 VAT. That concern was also very, very strong inside the ANC. As a consequence of which, the ANC itself made a written submission to the minister in which we pointed out the areas where we believe, without taking the budget to an austerity, without cutting expenditure, without cutting money that must be invested into the infrastructure so that we create jobs, and without affecting the employment of the health professionals, doctors, nurses, and to improve the quality and the status of our health facilities in the country and the education. We pointed out that here are the various other sources which we believe, had you considered, they would have assisted you to deal with the crisis that we are now having to contend with. The very simple one, by the way, but we can't blame the minister about that, is that after the minister presented the budget, you will recall that the commissioner of SARS then informed the nation that in terms of their own estimation, they've raised 9 billion rand more than what they were expecting to raise. What does that mean? That is a money that has not been accommodated in the processes that the minister was engaged when he put together his budget.
But of course, he wasn't listened to.
No, I don't think the question was about not being listening to per se. The question was, at the time at which the budget was being put together, that announcement and that consolidated report of the commissioner had not been made public. Now that is in public, we were able to say to the minister as the ANC, Minister, in terms of what this VAT is supposed to raise for this year, for this financial year, it's about 13 billion rand. There's a 9 billion rand you had not factored into your plan. It's now available. How do we make use of it? And if we agree we can make use of it, which the minister agreed, it means then we're looking for only 4 billion rand through the VAT, with all other sources were pointed out to him as the ANC and other political parties. Clearly, there's a way to get out of this situation, even if SARS had not really over-collected or collected more than their own expectation. But with SARS collection that has gone beyond what they were expecting, it even simplifies our own route in dealing with the contentious issue of the VAT.
But of course, I mean, whatever changes you are contemplating, or shall we say, better ways of handling the situation to avoid what you're coming out of now, you have to do that taking into account all the legal and constitutional provisions. And I'm raising this because whether it's a partner in the GNU taking a different view to the rest of the partners, or whether it's the leading partner in the GNU feeling that it can go outside of the GNU arrangement and negotiate or try to negotiate other deals with other players who are not part of the GNU, you have to do that within the confines of the Constitution and the law, among other things, ensuring that you do not usurp the powers that the minister has, the Minister of Finance, you know, in terms of the Constitution?
That's our commitment. Actually, the way in which we made an intervention for the reversal of the VAT was in line with the law. We've not violated any legislation. The committee sat, adopted the report, made a recommendation to Parliament. Parliament followed the same route we adopt, but within 30 days we're going to have to respond to this situation. So that was done within the parameters of the law. The issue of Vuyo about a new way of doing things, we've had to deal with this budget within the shortest period of time between the cabinet decision on the budget and its presentation to Parliament. What we need now is more time, because when we have got more time, there is more opportunity for various views and suggestions to be considered by the minister, even before he takes the budget to cabinet. Remember now, we were all intervening post a cabinet meeting, as opposed to intervening prior a cabinet meeting, and still have an opportunity as well, if the cabinet doesn't agree with some of our proposals, to intervene through Parliament. So the process we followed was perfectly legal. It's beyond reproach in terms of the legislation of Parliament and the laws of this country. That's why nobody can take it to court. Even those who attempted to do so, they were the first to celebrate when the VAT was removed, because they knew it's being removed within the ambit of the law. So all we need to do is to create more time for the national conversation on the budget inside Parliament, and of course with various stakeholders who may not necessarily be in Parliament, but have got important contributions to make in the formulation of the national budget.
Quick parting shot. ANC has a meeting with the DA tomorrow, where you're discussing issues other than the VAT increase. Just from the sense you're getting from the people you are leading in Parliament as their chief whip, what's their attitude like towards the continuation of the relationship between yourselves and the DA?
Well, I think you see what our own experience in Parliament is that, and this is not just about the budget. The DA has been, on many occasions, very dishonest to the ANC in Parliament, and that's the fact. That is why in one of the meetings of the programming committee, they came to the meeting and proposed that we need to set up a committee to oversee the president. And that matter was never discussed in the GNU Wills Forum, which I convene and chair. And on many other occasions, they've been behaving in a way that irritates, that causes irritation in the work of a Parliament in Cape Town. But you see, if we were the African National Congress, we made a decision consciously that we want the government of national unity. And we understood that this government of national unity is going to be, for itself, a contested terrain, particularly with the Democratic Alliance wanting to set the national agenda. So what they are doing now is not something that was unexpected from the point of view of the ANC. It's just that sometimes the level of irrationality on their part is really beyond our own expectation, because we were expecting that they are going to want to set the agenda, but do so in a responsible way, not in a way that, as we have experienced over the past few weeks and months, completely irrational and not consistent with what a political party which is committed to a national government of national, or the government of national unity, is supposed to behave. We will be meeting them tomorrow. I'm part of that delegation led by the ANC Secretary General, and I'll be very keen to know how do they explain this kind of a conduct, including insulting the African National Congress in public as a party that is intending to disadvantage the poor and the poorest of this country. Why do you have to campaign on the basis of that lie when you know it's a lie? Those are questions, in my view, that require answers. And how they are answered, I would imagine, will inform the way in which the ANC will adopt its own attitude about who exactly are these DA people in the GNU.
Mdumiseni Ntuli, thank you very much for your time this evening. The Chief Whip of the ANC.